The rain came down in sheets thick enough to drown the world. The sound of it mixed with the distant rumble of artillery, a low, rolling growl that shook the earth beneath the treads of the Sherman tank. Inside, the air smelled of oil, sweat, and old fear. Sergeant William "Bill" Carter leaned over the periscope, eyes squinting through streaks of mud on the glass, trying to see through the gray blur ahead. "Anything?" came Joe's voice from the gunner's seat, young, rough around the edges, but steady. "Just ghosts," Bill muttered. "And rain." Every mile through northern France felt like crawling through the stomach of a dying beast. What had once been fields of wheat were now churned into brown rivers of muck. Trees stood like splintered bones. Somewhere in that mess was the enemy, unseen, waiting. Behind him, the crew worked in tense silence. Davis, the loader, kept his hands moving even when there was nothing to load, a nervous habit that made the shells clink against their metal racks. Alvarez, the driver, hunched forward like a man praying to the engine. Reed, the radio operator, fiddled with the dials, whispering updates from command that came through as bursts of static and half-sentences. They'd been moving for hours with no word of their objective, only the same order repeating over the radio: advance through the village, hold position, await further instruction. It was the kind of order that usually meant no one in command really knew what was happening. Bill rubbed the back of his neck, eyes flicking to the faint glow of the instrument panel. "Stay sharp," he said quietly. "Tigers were spotted somewhere near here." A silence heavier than the rain filled the cabin. Joe spat into a rag. "Hell, Sarge, you sure that wasn't just talk? We've been hearing about those ghosts since Normandy." "They ain't ghosts," said Davis from the back. "They're monsters. One shell from those things and poof, whole tank gone." Bill didn't answer. He'd seen it. Back near Cannes, he'd watched a Tiger take out 3 Shermans in a single minute. Its 88mm gun had carved through steel like paper. The Americans had poured everything they had into it: artillery, rockets, desperation, and it just kept moving, silent and deliberate, like death itself. "Let's not think about it," Alvarez muttered, shifting gears. The Sherman lurched forward, engine growling. But thinking about it was all Bill could do. The war had stripped away everything else. Fear was the only thing that still felt real. The village appeared out of the fog like a mirage, half-collapsed stone houses, a church tower snapped in half, windows like hollow eyes. The rain turned the narrow streets into rivers of mud and ash. "Looks empty," Reed said. Bill raised the periscope again. "Yeah. That's what scares me." They rolled into the outskirts, tread squelching in the muck. Somewhere in the distance, a single gunshot cracked, echoing off the broken walls. Then, silence again. Joe shifted the cannon. "Permission to fire a few blind rounds, Sarge? Just to say hello?" "Negative," Bill said. "We're low on shells. Keep your finger off the trigger till you've got a target." A flash of movement caught his eye, a shadow darting between 2 ruined houses. "Hold," he hissed. The tank stopped. Everyone froze. The rain hammered the armor like drumming fingers. Then came the sound, deep, guttural, metallic. Not thunder. Not artillery. The unmistakable growl of another tank's engine. Bill's breath caught in his throat. "That's not one of ours." Through the haze, the silhouette emerged, broad, angular, terrifyingly calm. The Tiger Eye. Its barrel, thick as a tree trunk, swung toward them like an accusing finger. "Move! Move!" Bill shouted. Alvarez slammed the throttle. The Sherman roared, tread spinning in the mud as the Tiger fired. The explosion hit seconds later, the ground jumped, shrapnel clanging off the hull. The blast lit up the ruined street like lightning. "Shell incoming!" Davis shouted. "Back her up!" The Sherman lurched in reverse, sliding sideways on the soaked ground. Another shot, closer this time, tore through a building beside them, sending bricks cascading over the tank. Joe fired back, the gun's thunder rattling their bones. The shell hit the tiger's side, smoke, but no penetration. Didn't even scratch it. Joe yelled. Hit again. I'm trying. The next tiger round screamed past them, missing by inches. The shockwave knocked Alvarez's head against the control panel. Blood streamed down his temple. Bill's voice cut through the panic. Smoke. Now. Reed pulled the lever, flooding the street with thick white smoke. The Sherman reversed into an alley, engine howling. The Tiger's cannon boomed again, blindly firing into the fog. For a long moment, all anyone could hear was their own breathing. You okay, Al? Bill asked. Still here, Alvarez grunted, wiping blood from his eyes. Barely. Reed swallowed hard. We're not gonna make it if it follows us. It won't, Bill said, though he wasn't sure. They're slow. They move like fortresses. They'll wait until morning. He looked out through the smoke, watching the faint orange glow of fires spreading through the village. The tiger had vanished back into the fog, as if it had never been there. They pulled back to the outskirts, setting up in the ruins of a barn. The tank hissed softly, steam rising off its armor. No one spoke for a while. The rain softened to a drizzle, the quiet broken only by the ticking of cooling metal. Joe broke the silence. How the hell are we supposed to fight that thing? It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Bill sat on the edge of the tank, pulling off his helmet. His face was streaked with grime and exhaustion. You don't fight it head-on, he said. You wait. You think. And you hope it runs out of gas before it finds you. Davis gave a bitter laugh. Hell of a plan. They shared what little food they had left, hard biscuits and lukewarm coffee from a tin. Outside, the night pressed close around them, heavy and silent. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the tiger's engine again, faint but unmistakable, like a predator's growl echoing through the woods. Bill tried to rest, but sleep was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flash of the tiger's cannon, the way it had erased the world in fire and sound. When dawn came, it brought no peace, only the endless gray of war. Reed's voice broke the morning stillness. Command's been trying to reach us all night, he said, tapping the radio. They want a sit rep. Tell them we ran into a tiger, Bill said. Tell them we lived. Reed hesitated. That's not all. There's chatter, a recon patrol found something nearby. A German tank, immobilized, abandoned by its crew. Joe looked up sharply. You mean that tiger? No, Reed said. Different one. Same model, though. Damaged but intact. Bill frowned. Where? 2 clicks west, near the church ruins. Silence fell again. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and heavy. Bill could feel every eye on him, waiting for the order. They want us to check it out, Reed added quietly. Secure it for recovery. Joe let out a dry laugh. You've got to be kidding me. After what just happened, they want us to go looking for another tiger. Orders are orders, Bill said, though his stomach turned at the thought. Davis shook his head. This ain't about orders anymore. It's suicide. Bill looked out toward the distant ruins, where smoke still curled into the gray morning sky. Somewhere beyond that horizon was the monster they'd feared for months, maybe crippled, maybe waiting. He thought of the men who'd died trying to stop those machines. Friends burned alive inside their tanks, their screams buried under the roar of engines and gunfire. The tiger wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of everything that made this war feel endless. Pack it up, Bill said finally. We move in 20. No one argued. They rolled out again, tracks crunching over the wet road, the village receding behind them. The air felt different now, heavier, charged with something unseen. Joe sat in silence, his hands resting on the gun controls. "You really think it's empty?" he asked after a while. "I think," Bill said, "we'll find out soon enough." The road narrowed into a line of shattered trees, each one blackened by shellfire. Birds had stopped singing here. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. When they reached the ridge overlooking the church, they saw it. The Tiger lay half buried in mud, one track torn loose, its massive turret frozen mid-turn. Smoke still rose from its engine. For a moment, it looked almost peaceful, like a sleeping giant. "Jesus," Davis whispered. "It's beautiful. Beautiful, and terrifying." Even wrecked, the thing radiated power. Its armor gleamed faintly beneath the grime, thicker than anything the Americans could match. Bill climbed down from the Sherman, boots sinking into the mud. The air stank of fuel and death. He approached slowly, rifle raised. The Tiger's hatch hung open, black inside. Flies buzzed lazily around the edges. He peered in, and froze. The crew was still there. 4 men, or what was left of them, slumped in their seats. Burned uniforms. Charred flesh. The smell hit him like a hammer. He pulled back, swallowing hard. "All dead," he said quietly. Reed crossed himself. "Guess they didn't make it out in time." Joe climbed onto the hull, running a hand over the thick armor. "Hard to believe this thing's finally down," he said. "All that armor, all that firepower, and still just a coffin in the mud." Bill stared at the open hatch. He couldn't shake the feeling that the dead inside were watching him, that the machine itself was watching him. He turned to the others. "Get the radio working. Tell command we found their prize." As Reed began transmitting, the wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of engines in the distance, faint, but familiar. Bill's eyes narrowed. "That sound again," Alvarez whispered. No one spoke. The low growl rolled across the fields like distant thunder. Joe met Bill's eyes. "Another one?" Bill didn't answer. He just looked at the dead German crew, then back toward the horizon. The wind carried the smell of oil and rain. The clouds thickened. He climbed back onto the Sherman, his voice low but steady. "We're not alone out here," he said. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Reed whispered the words none of them wanted to say. "Then let's hope theirs runs out of fuel before we do." The sound of engines faded, leaving only the rain. Bill looked once more at the Tiger, this fallen beast of steel and smoke, and felt something shift inside him. Fear, yes. But also something colder. Resolve. He climbed back into his tank, shutting the hatch tight. "Let's move out," he said. "The hunt's just begun." The Sherman roared to life, its engine growling against the storm. As they rolled away, the captured Tiger loomed behind them, half submerged, silent, a monument to everything they'd survived, and everything still waiting in the fog ahead. And though none of them said it aloud, they all felt it, the strange certainty that this wouldn't be the last time they saw that beast's shadow. Not by a long shot. The fog was thicker than before, dense, gray, and silent as smoke from a dying fire. The morning sun barely pierced it, turning the world into a pale ghost of itself. The Sherman crawled along the ruined road, its treads groaning, the engines hummed the only sound in the dead countryside. Bill Carter kept his eyes on the periscope, watching the shapes shift in and out of the mist. The wrecked houses, the broken trees, they all looked like specters waiting to move. "Feels wrong," Joe muttered from the gunner's seat, his voice low. "Too quiet." "It's France," Davis said without looking up. "It's always quiet before it kills you." Alvarez's hands were steady on the controls. "We close?" Reed checked his map, its edges worn from mud and sweat. "About half a mile more. Near the church ruins." Bill didn't answer. He felt the weight in his gut grow heavier with every turn of the tracks. The radio had confirmed it this morning. The tiger they'd found wasn't a rumor. A German giant, crippled and left behind in retreat. Command wanted it secured. No one had said why, but Bill knew. They wanted to study it, to know how to kill the others. The tiger had become more than a tank. It was a legend. Every soldier on the Western Front knew its name. It was the shadow that haunted every road, the sound behind every heartbeat in the dark. Bill's fingers tightened around the handles of the periscope. The fog thinned just enough for him to see the spire of a broken church jutting up from the mist like a black tooth. "There," he said. The Sherman rolled to a stop on the ridge. Down below, sprawled across a ditch and half buried in mud, lay the tiger. Its hull was scarred, one track blown off, the gun drooping like the head of a wounded animal. The once feared symbol of German strength was now still, quiet, almost humbled. No one spoke. Even Joe, usually quick with a joke or curse, stared wordlessly through his sight. "Damn thing's huge," he whispered. "Makes ours look like toys." Bill climbed out first. The air outside was cold and sharp, laced with the scent of oil and damp earth. His boots sank into the mud as he approached. Every step sounded too loud. The tiger loomed above him, its gray armor streaked black with soot. Shell impacts dotted its sides like scars. The long barrel of its 88mm gun pointed toward the tree-line, as if still guarding something unseen. "Jesus," Davis muttered, climbing down beside him. "You could park 3 Shermans in there and still have room for dinner." Reed followed, holding his carbine tight, eyes darting through the fog. No movement. Maybe the Krauts cleared out. Or maybe they didn't, Alvarez said softly, scanning the ridge. Bill ignored them. He ran a gloved hand along the armor plate, feeling the cold steel beneath the grime. It was thick, far thicker than their own. It wasn't just a tank, it was a fortress on treads. He circled toward the rear, where the engine compartment was blown open. The smell hit him first, burned oil, metal, and something worse. Human. He stopped, jaw tightening. Inside the turret, he could see what was left of the crew. 4 men, slumped in death. Their faces blackened, their uniforms scorched. One still held a half-melted photograph. Bill looked closer. A woman. 2 children. Smiling. He swallowed hard. They didn't make it out. Joe climbed up beside him, eyes narrowing at the sight. "Good," he said, then hesitated. "I mean, hell. You know what I mean." Bill nodded, though he wasn't sure he did. These men had been his enemy, but now they were just burned ghosts inside a steel tomb. Reed's voice came from behind them. "Command says to hold position until engineers arrive. They're sending a recovery team." Davis let out a dry laugh. "Great. So we sit here babysitting a damn corpse of a tank while Jerry's still out there breathing." "Orders are orders," Bill said quietly. He couldn't take his eyes off that photograph. The woman's smile was haunting, soft, unaware, eternal. He took it from the dead man's fingers and slipped it into his pocket before he could stop himself. They set up a perimeter around the wreck. The air was heavy, the silence deeper than before. The tiger seemed to radiate something, not just menace, but memory. Its blackened armor told a story, the power it once held, the destruction it had brought, the men who had believed in it until the end. Hours passed. The fog didn't lift. Alvarez sat against the Sherman's tread, cleaning his pistol with slow, deliberate strokes. "I keep thinking about the men inside," he said finally. "How fast it must have happened. One hit, and," he snapped his fingers. "Gone." Joe shrugged. "Better them than us. Doesn't make it right." Bill sat nearby, writing in a small, battered notebook. His handwriting was shaky, the words cramped. Another machine. Another set of faces. We destroy them. They destroy us. The same fire, different uniforms. He stopped and closed the book. The words didn't help. Nothing did. Around noon, Reed caught a faint signal on the radio, a German transmission, nearby. They couldn't make out the words, but the tone was sharp, urgent. Could be a patrol, Reed said. Or a unit coming to finish what they started. Get everyone ready, Bill said immediately. If they want their tank back, they'll have to crawl over us to get it. They took positions in the ruins. The fog muffled every sound, but then came the unmistakable click of boots on gravel. Figures moved through the mist, 3, maybe 4. Bill's pulse quickened. Hold, he whispered. The first German stepped into view, carrying a satchel charge. His eyes widened when he saw the Americans crouched behind the wreckage. He shouted, "Too late." Joe fired, the shot echoing like thunder. The German fell, blood blooming across his chest. Chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked through the fog. Davis fired his rifle until the clip was empty. Reed reloaded beside him, hands trembling. A bullet hit the ground inches from Alvarez's boot, spraying dirt. Flank left. Bill shouted. They moved with grim precision, years of training taking over where fear might have ruled. The firefight lasted only minutes. When it ended, 4 Germans lay motionless near the ditch. One of them was barely breathing. Bill approached him slowly, gun raised. The man looked no older than 20. His lips moved around broken words. Nicht, zerstören. Reed translated under his breath. He's saying, don't destroy it. The German's eyes flicked toward the tiger, then back at Bill. There was something almost pleading there. Then the light went out of them. Bill lowered his weapon. The air stank of smoke and blood again. Davis kicked at a rifle on the ground. All that, for a dead tank. Not dead enough, Bill said quietly. They buried the bodies in the mud and sat in silence afterward. Joe lit a cigarette, the glow bright in the gloom. You think that's it? You think they were the only ones? No, Bill said. He looked at the tiger, hulking and still, its surface now speckled with rain. There's always more. By evening, the engineers arrived, 3 men in mud-streaked uniforms, faces weary but curious. They moved around the tiger like surgeons around a body. One of them, a lieutenant with spectacles too clean for war, ran a hand over the armor. Remarkable, he murmured. The craftsmanship, the design, it's like nothing else in the field. Nothing else eats fuel like it either, another engineer said. We ran the numbers from captured records. 120 miles per tank. Can you imagine? Davis snorted. That thing could conquer a city but not cross a country. The lieutenant smiled faintly. Still, it's a marvel. Fear was its real weapon. Men saw this coming, and they ran. Bill didn't reply. He'd seen enough to know fear didn't need engineering, it only needed a moment of doubt. They worked into the evening, documenting, sketching, measuring. The Americans guarded the perimeter, rifles resting but hands never far from the triggers. The fog thinned slightly as dusk bled into night, revealing the tiger in full at last, massive, brutal, beautiful in its own grim way. Joe leaned against the Sherman, staring at it. You ever think about what drives a man to build something like that? Same thing that drives a man to stop it, Bill said. Belief. And what do you believe in, Sarge? Bill hesitated. Survival. It wasn't the answer Joe wanted, but it was the only honest one left. When the engineers finished, they packed their tools, promising to send a recovery team at dawn. The soldiers prepared to camp for the night. The rain returned, soft at first, then relentless. Bill sat under the Sherman's hatch, staring at the tiger through the downpour. The burned metal seemed to shimmer in the lightning's flash. The dead crew was gone now, their bodies taken away, but their presence lingered in the air. Reed approached quietly. "You should get some rest." "Can't," Bill said. "You keep staring at it like it's going to move." Bill's jaw tightened. "It already did." Reed didn't understand, but he didn't ask. He just nodded and walked back to the others. The storm grew louder. Bill stayed where he was, watching, waiting. The tiger loomed in the rain like a monument to everything they couldn't destroy completely. Then he heard it. Faint at first, carried on the wind, the low, distant growl of an engine. He froze, listening. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't their own. It was deeper, heavier, alive. He rose slowly, eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the trees. Joe's voice came from behind him. "You hear that?" "Yeah," Bill said quietly. His heart thudded once, hard. Alvarez appeared at the hatch, wide-eyed. "Sarge, tell me that's not what I think it is." Bill didn't need to answer. The sound was growing louder, closer. Through the mist, a faint light flickered. Not lightning. Headlamps. He looked once more at the captured tiger, lying still in the mud, and felt the chill crawl up his spine. "The beast has a twin," he said. "And it's coming." The rain swallowed his words, the sound of engines rumbling beneath it like an approaching storm. Bill climbed into the Sherman, sealing the hatch. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled. "Everyone ready up. We're not leaving this one behind." The crew moved fast, their exhaustion forgotten. The radio crackled to life with fragments of reports, movement spotted, armor division nearby, but it was already too late for warnings. The sound was right on top of them now, unmistakable. Joe loaded the cannon, his jaw set. "Guess the hunt goes both ways." Bill stared through the periscope, the fog ahead glowing faintly with the light of something massive. He whispered to himself, barely audible over the rising storm. Round 2. The tiger's shadow emerged from the mist. And then the world went white with the first flash of gunfire. The rain hadn't stopped. It fell in relentless waves, drumming against the metal hull of the Sherman and hissing off the mud-caked ground. The smell of oil and gunpowder hung thick in the air, heavy as breath in a tomb. Bill Carter sat hunched inside the tank, eyes locked on the periscope, watching for movement through the mist. The captured tiger lay half buried behind them, a silent monument under the storm. In the gray distance, engines growled, low, steady, approaching. "Distance?" Bill asked. Reed adjusted the radio dials, static whispering like wind through broken glass. "Half a mile. Maybe less. Can't tell for sure in this soup." Joe's hands hovered over the cannon's controls, fingers twitching. "Feels close enough." Davis wiped his palms on his trousers, smearing grease across his knees. "We should move before they spot us." "No," Bill said. "We stand here." The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Bill didn't look at them. His gaze stayed fixed on the fog ahead, on the sound drawing closer, mechanical, deliberate, patient. He could feel it in the ground, a vibration deep and cold. "It's the same one," Joe said quietly. "The other tiger." Bill nodded once. "Then this is where we end it." Lightning flashed, illuminating the church ruins for an instant. The spire stood like a jagged spear against the storm. Then the darkness returned, and with it came the roar of the tiger's engine. Alvarez gripped the controls tighter. "Here we go." The first shell hit near the ditch, throwing mud across the Sherman's side. The sound was like the sky splitting open. Joe swung the turret, tracking the flash in the fog. "Target, left ridge. Fire." The cannon thundered, the recoil slamming through the hull. The shell vanished into the mist, then the explosion bloomed somewhere unseen. Bill didn't wait to see the result. Reload. Davis slammed another shell into the breech. Loaded. The tiger fired again. The shell screamed past, slamming into the earth behind them. Dirt and metal rained over the tank. The ground shook under the impact. "They're bracketing us," Reed shouted. "They've got our range." Bill gritted his teeth. "Then we move." Alvarez gunned the engine, the Sherman lurching forward. The treads churned mud, the tank sliding into position behind a collapsed wall. Joe fired again, the flash lighting the interior for a heartbeat, sweat, fear, determination etched into every face. Through the periscope, Bill caught sight of it at last, the tiger's dark silhouette emerging from the fog. Its armor gleamed wet and black. Its gun turned slowly, unhurried, confident. "Big bastard looks untouched," Joe muttered. "Not for long," Bill said. He felt something cold inside him then, not fear, not anger, something harder. Resolve. "Davis, load AP. Joe, aim for the treads. We cripple it first." Joe adjusted, breath steady. The next shot hit home. Sparks and smoke burst from the tiger's side. It didn't stop. Didn't even slow it down. Joe shouted. "Keep hitting it." The tiger fired again, its shell smashing into the wall beside them. The blast blew Alvarez backward in his seat, dazing him. "I'm hit." Alvarez gasped, clutching his shoulder. "Reed, take the wheel." Bill ordered. Reed hesitated only a moment before sliding into position, hands trembling on the controls. The tank shuddered as it backed into cover, the engine whining in protest. Outside, the storm roared louder, the wind screaming through broken buildings. The tiger's turret turned toward them, its muzzle glowing faintly red from heat. Bill's voice cut through the noise. "Joe, now." Joe fired again. The shot struck the tiger's side armor with a dull clang, ricocheting off harmlessly. "Goddamn thing's made of stone." "Switch to he." Bill shouted. "Aim for the flank, force it to turn." Joe obeyed, the shell firing with a flash that illuminated his grim expression. The explosion tore up the ground beside the tiger, showering it with dirt and debris. It turned, slow but menacing, adjusting its aim. "Good," Bill whispered. "Make it chase us." They reversed through the ruins, weaving between shattered walls and burning timber. Every shot the tiger fired closed the distance, its accuracy terrifying. Davis cursed under his breath, reloading. "We can't keep trading blows like this." Bill knew he was right. The Sherman was fast, but outmatched. One direct hit would turn them into fire and bone. Through the smoke, he caught sight of the captured tiger again, its massive frame lying silent under the rain. An idea sparked, reckless and wild. He turned to the crew. "We're switching rides." Joe blinked. "You're joking." "Dead serious," Bill said. "That thing still runs. We get it moving, we use it against them." Alvarez groaned, pale but conscious. "You're gonna fight a tiger, with another tiger? Only way to kill a beast is with one of its own." There was no time for debate. The tiger's next shell screamed past, clipping the Sherman's track. The tank jolted, metal screeching. Smoke filled the cabin. "Bail out!" Bill shouted. They scrambled through the hatch into the rain. The air was thick with gunfire and thunder. Bill led the charge toward the wrecked tiger, slipping in the mud. The enemy's shots tore chunks from the earth around them. Reed ducked behind a wall, panting. "We'll never get it started." Bill ignored him. He climbed onto the captured tiger, pulling open the hatch. The interior still stank of smoke and death. The bodies were gone, but their presence lingered. Joe climbed in after him, eyes wide. "You sure about this?" "No," Bill said. "Get in anyway." Davis followed, fumbling with the controls. "Everything's in German." "I don't care if it's in Sanskrit," Bill snapped. "Make it move." Lightning flashed again. The battlefield lit up, two beasts facing each other through the storm. One alive, one reborn. The engine coughed once, then twice. Davis twisted wires, cursed, hit the panel with his fist. The tiger roared to life, smoke billowing from the exhaust. Joe laughed, wild and breathless. "Son of a bitch. She lives." Bill gripped the controls, feeling the vibration beneath his hands. The steel beast trembled like a heart waking from the dead. The enemy tiger turned its gun toward them. "Let's give them something to be scared of," Bill said. He eased the throttle. The captured tiger rolled forward, its massive weight crushing debris beneath its treads. The ground shook with each movement. Joe manned the gun, eyes locked on the target. Range 200. Fire. The shot landed square against the other tiger's turret. The explosion tore away a chunk of armor, but the enemy didn't stop. It fired back instantly. The round hit their side, rattling the cabin, ringing their bones. "Hit!" Davis shouted. "Armor's holding." Bill's vision blurred. He steadied his breathing. Again. Joe fired. The second shell hit lower, near the treads. Sparks erupted, then flames. The enemy tank shuddered, struggling to turn. Reed's voice crackled through the smoke. "They're backing off." Bill's knuckles whitened. "Not yet, they aren't." He pushed the tiger forward, closing the distance. The two machines collided with a sound like thunder tearing open the sky. Steel ground against steel. Joe reloaded, aimed point blank, and fired. The shot pierced through the enemy's front plate. The explosion that followed was deafening, fire bursting through the hatch, smoke rising into the storm. For a heartbeat, everything went silent except the hiss of rain on burning metal. Then Joe exhaled, trembling. "We got it," he whispered. "We actually got it." Bill didn't answer. He sat frozen, staring through the periscope at the wreck burning before them. The German tiger, once unstoppable, now lay broken in the mud, flames licking its armor. Reed climbed halfway out of the hatch, scanning the horizon. No more movement. "They're pulling back." Davis leaned against the wall, exhausted. "It's over." But Bill didn't feel relief, only emptiness. He looked at his crew, at the mud-streaked faces, the blood, the exhaustion. Joe's hands were trembling. Alvarez sat slumped, pale and silent, his uniform soaked dark with blood. Bill reached over and gripped his shoulder. "You did good, Al." Alvarez tried to smile. "Told you. I'd drive us through hell." Then his head fell forward, eyes closing. Joe stared, frozen. "Al." Bill said nothing. He could still hear the faint hum of the tiger's engine beneath them, steady and indifferent. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the fire's glow into ripples of orange and gray. They climbed out of the tank together. The air was heavy with the scent of smoke and rain-soaked earth. The battlefield stretched silent before them, two monsters side by side, both lifeless now. Joe sat on the tiger's hull, cigarette trembling between his fingers. "We tamed it," he said softly. "We actually tamed the beast." Bill looked out toward the horizon, where dawn was trying to break through the clouds. "No," he said. "We just borrowed its strength long enough to survive." The words hung in the air, swallowed by the rain. Reed crouched beside Alvarez's still form, head bowed. Davis stood a few paces away, staring at the wrecks, his face unreadable. For a while, none of them spoke. The storm quieted. The wind softened. Bill turned back toward the Sherman, what was left of it, and then to the burning tiger. Both looked the same now, blackened metal, hollow shells. The war didn't care who had built them or who had died inside. He lit one of Joe's cigarettes and took a long drag. The smoke stung his throat. "We won," Joe said after a moment. "Didn't we?" Bill looked at the flames flickering in the distance. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We did. But the victory tasted like ashes." He looked down at Alvarez one last time, then at the lifeless German tank across the field. 2 machines. 2 crews. Both dead for the same reason, men too stubborn to back down. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of burning fuel and wet earth. Somewhere far off, artillery rumbled again, faint but steady. The war was still moving, still devouring. Bill turned toward his remaining men. "Let's pack what we can. We're leaving at first light." They nodded without a word. He looked back at the captured Tiger, its engine still idling faintly. In the dull light, it looked almost alive again, breathing, waiting. He reached up, shut it off, and whispered, "Rest now." The silence that followed was complete. Rain fell softly over both tanks, washing away the soot, cooling the metal. The night's echoes faded into distant thunder. Bill stood there until the last fire went out, the last ember drowned in the mud. Only then did he turn away. Behind him, the battlefield was quiet again, but the sound of engines still haunted the edges of his mind. He knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Not for any of them. The war didn't end with the explosion, it just got quieter. Days passed in a haze of smoke and silence, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The skies over Normandy had cleared, but the fields were still littered with ghosts. Charred hulls, burned-out houses, empty helmets half buried in mud, monuments of a madness that refused to be buried. Bill Carter sat on the edge of the captured Tiger, its armor now cold and lifeless beneath him. The rain had long stopped, but the air still smelled of steel and ash. His fingers traced the scorch marks along the turret, the scars of battle frozen in metal. Every line told a story he didn't want to remember. Behind him, Reed and Joe worked in silence, patching up what little gear they could salvage from the Sherman. Davis was a few paces away, burying Alvarez near the hedgerow, marking the grave with a simple wooden cross carved from a broken rifle stock. No words were said, there weren't any left to say. Bill watched the sunrise push against the mist. Pale light spilled over the ruins, turning the battlefield into something almost peaceful. It felt wrong. Joe finally broke the silence. "Command wants us to regroup near Cannes. Says we'll get new orders." Bill didn't turn. "New orders," he repeated, the words dry in his mouth. "Always new orders." Reed kicked at a spent shell casing, sending it clinking across the mud. "We can barely move. The Sherman's a wreck, and this Tiger's got a busted tread. We're not going anywhere fast." "We'll move when we can," Bill said. Davis walked back from the grave, wiping mud from his hands. His face looked older than it had a week ago. "He didn't suffer long," he said quietly. Bill nodded. He wanted to believe that. For a long time, the only sound was the wind moving through the grass. Then Joe spoke again, his voice distant. "You think they'll remember us? What we did here?" Bill looked at him, then out at the wreck scattered across the field. "Maybe," he said. "But not like this. Not the way it really was." He could already imagine the reports, enemy armor destroyed. Objective secured. Minimal losses. Words that stripped away everything, the noise, the fear, the smell of burning men. They'd call it victory, but Bill knew better. Victory didn't look like this. As the morning brightened, the men began their slow preparations to move. Reed got the radio working long enough to catch static-laced chatter from nearby units. The front was shifting east. The Germans were falling back. The Allies were advancing. The war machine rolled on. But inside, Bill felt hollow. He watched his crew go about their work, each man moving like a shadow. Joe's jokes had faded. Reed no longer whistled. Davis spoke only when necessary. They were alive, but something in them had burned out. He knew it because he felt it too. He glanced at the Tiger's blackened interior one last time. The control levers were stiff, the dials cracked, the seat cushions torn. He remembered the weight of it, the vibration, the thunder, the moment it came alive under his hands. For a brief, terrible hour, he had felt power beyond human measure. And he hated himself for how good it had felt. That was the part no one ever talked about, the temptation of it. The way war could make gods out of frightened men, only to strip them bare again. By noon, they had scavenged what fuel they could and rigged the Sherman's engine enough to limp forward. Reed sat in the driver's seat, coaxing it along the muddy trail while the others rode on the back, their eyes scanning the empty fields. The countryside was eerily still. No birds, no movement. Just the ruins of villages, their church towers broken, windows blown out, bells lying silent in the dust. Joe spoke softly, almost to himself. You ever think about what's next? After all this? Davis shrugged. Get home, I guess. Fix up my father's workshop. Pretend I never left. Reed snorted. You think we can just go back? After seeing this? Joe didn't answer. Neither did Bill. They crossed a small bridge, its railings bent and blackened. Below, the river carried the reflection of smoke and sky together, gray bleeding into gray. Bill found himself staring into it, searching for something he couldn't name. He remembered the day they enlisted, fresh uniforms, nervous smiles, promises to write home. It felt like another life entirely. The boy who had signed his name on that line was gone, buried somewhere between the hedgerows and the shell holes. That night, they camped near a farmhouse half-collapsed from shellfire. The roof was gone, the walls cracked, but the cellar still held a few unbroken jars of food. They sat around a small fire, the flickering light casting their faces in sharp relief. Joe sipped from a tin cup. I keep hearing that engine in my sleep, he said. The Tiger. Even when it's quiet, I can hear it. Like it's still out there. Reed nodded slowly. I dream about it too. That sound, it's like the devil breathing. Bill stared into the fire. The flames crackled, throwing sparks into the cold night air. That sound kept us alive, he said finally. And it killed a lot of men trying to do the same. No one replied. The truth hung there, too heavy to move past. Later, when the others slept, Bill sat awake, staring up at the shattered beams above. The stars were faint, blurred by lingering smoke. He thought about Alvarez, about the men who had been inside that other Tiger, about the ones whose names he'd never know. Enemy or ally, it didn't matter. They'd all been trapped in the same storm, fighting for breath inside machines built to destroy. He took out a small, worn photograph from his pocket. His wife, smiling, holding their newborn daughter. He hadn't seen them in over 2 years. The paper was creased, the edges torn, but her eyes still looked the same, bright, alive, untouched by this madness. He whispered to the empty night, I'm still coming home. The words felt strange. Heavy. At dawn, the sound of distant artillery returned, a reminder that the war hadn't stopped, only moved on. Reed was the first to wake, stretching stiffly before shaking the others. They packed their things without a word. Before leaving, Bill walked to the edge of the field where Alvarez lay buried. The wooden cross stood crooked in the wind, the name carved rough but clear. He crouched beside it, resting his hand on the damp earth. We made it through, he said softly. But I don't know what that means anymore. He stayed there for a long moment, then rose and turned away. As they rolled east, the countryside began to change. Roads cleared. The ruins gave way to open fields again. Here and there, farmers returned to their land, moving among the wreckage like ghosts reclaiming what was left of their lives. Children waved as the tank passed, their faces thin but curious. Bill forced himself to wave back. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of something, maybe not hope, but something close. By evening, they reached a crossroads where Allied supply convoys were regrouping. Trucks, jeeps, medics, all moving in a tired but determined rhythm. The war machine, relentless as ever. A major approached them, clipboard in hand. "You Carter's crew?" Bill nodded. "Good work out there. We heard about the Tiger. Hell of a thing you pulled off." Bill didn't answer. He didn't feel like a hero. The major continued, oblivious. "We'll get you reassigned soon. Rest while you can." When the man walked away, Joe muttered, "Hell of a thing," he says. "Like we just fixed a flat tire." Reed laughed dryly. "To them, maybe we did." Davis looked at Bill. "What now, Sarge?" Bill stared out across the camp, the soldiers, the smoke, the endless movement. "Now we wait," he said. That night, he sat alone at the edge of the camp, the stars clearer than they'd been in months. He could hear laughter somewhere in the distance, brief, fragile, human. It sounded foreign, like something from another world. He thought again of the Tiger, of the fire, the noise, the moment of silence that followed. It haunted him, not because of what it was, but because of what it revealed. Power, courage, fear, they were all the same under pressure. War didn't create monsters. It just stripped away everything else until only the truth remained. He wondered how many more truths the world could survive. When the wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of church bells from a nearby village, he closed his eyes. It wasn't victory he heard in them. It was mourning. He took a long breath, feeling the ache in his chest, the weight of it all. "Maybe war isn't about who wins," he murmured, "but who's left to remember." The words settled in the cold air like ash. He looked once more toward the east, where the front still rumbled on the horizon. Then he tucked the photograph back into his pocket and rose slowly to his feet. Tomorrow, the war would continue. But tonight, just for this moment, he let himself feel the quiet. The stillness. The fragile pulse of something like peace. And as the dawn crept over the camp, painting the sky gold against the gray, Bill Carter walked toward it, not as a soldier, not as a victor, but as a man carrying the weight of memory. Behind him, the field was silent. Only the rusted shape of the Tiger remained, half hidden by fog, a monument to both fury and survival. The beast was dead. But the echoes of its heart still lingered, somewhere deep within the men who had faced it, lived through it, and would never, ever forget.